Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon to those of you who are in Europe or in other places. I'm Dick Morningstar. I'm the founding chairman of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council, and it is our pleasure today to host the official launch of USAID's Europe Energy Bridge, which aims to improve European energy security by connecting allies in the region to American investors, technologies, and expertise. This new $94 million initiative builds on decades of USAID work in Europe and Eurasia. The bridge will strengthen relationships with our European allies through work on competitive energy markets, infrastructure investment, and protection of critical infrastructure. Energy diplomacy, I think, has been a success story for US-EU relations. I've certainly been involved in energy diplomacy with Europe over the years, and we hope that today's conversation will shine some light on how that can continue. I'll briefly outline what the program is and then move ahead. If you have questions, there is a Q&A icon on your Zoom account, and just submit the questions, any questions on that. It's we only have an hour and we have several participants, so we need to move ahead. We're going to start with keynote remarks from Brock Behrman, who is the Assistant Administrator for Europe and Eurasia at AID, and who is a veteran of the development world and also a former, if not present, entrepreneur. And he'll give keynote remarks. Then we'll hear from Steve Burns, who is the Chief for Energy and Infrastructure on Europe and Eurasia at AID, who'll go over the program in more technical detail. And then we will have a panel, and I'll just briefly go through the panel without much of an introduction as far as what they've done in their lives. But Jane Amelat, who's a Deputy Head of Unit at the Directorate General of Energy in the European Commission, she'll be on the panel, as well as Viktor Andanov, who is the Energy Advisor to the Prime Minister for the Government of the Republic of North Macedonia, one of the countries which will be very much affected, hopefully in a positive way, by this program. We have Bob Eichord, who's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and is a legend from his many years at AID, including working for years on all of the programs that AID had in the past in Eastern Europe and in Eurasia. And William Poland, who is Senior Director at the United States Energy Association, also with much experience in the Western Balkans. I might say that Steve Burns will be on the panel to the extent that people have questions after his technical presentation. I think we best go direct to the program. So I'm turning it over to Brock for Brock Behrman for your keynote remarks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Morningstar, and good morning. And I'd like to say that every single member of the Bureau is entrepreneurial. We are very much thinking throughout all sectors, not just the energy here in the ENE Bureau, but definitely entrepreneurial. But I'm happy to be here today to kick off the next generation of USAID's continued assistance programming focused on energy security and critical infrastructure protection throughout Europe and Eurasia. USAID's Energy Bridge initiative builds on, as the ambassador said, more than 25 years of successful energy assistance of countries throughout Europe and Eurasia and the former Soviet Union. This initiative focuses on countries surrounding the European Union, and we're very proud that utilities and regulatory agencies in several EU member states continue to partner with USAID on the Bridges programs. In partnership with our EU allies, USAID's program enables countries in the region to establish critical market and regulatory preconditions for infrastructure project development. Let me just reiterate, it's important to recognize that we are now partnering with our former recipients to assist other countries in need. USAID's engagement in the region is now more important than ever. Our partners clearly understand our role and the laser focus of our development throughout all of our missions. Europe is at a critical time in its history, and our partners throughout Eastern Bloc and Soviet republics are deciding which paths they will take. These decisions will have significant ramifications for global security for the next generation. Energy plays a critical role in the decision-making process. Simply put, energy independence and democratic process are synonymous with the country's self-reliance. Before discussing the future of USAID's energy assistance in the region, it's worth reflecting back on how we've already accomplished with our partners to build the energy sector in Europe and Eurasia. USAID has substantially changed the landscape in less than a generation. This is significant because at the same time, these countries were suffering from stifling management that restricted their ability to be innovative and industrial. USAID and US experts, and especially those who volunteer their time and talent, help these countries throughout the region to restore defunct power systems, moving from limited service, often just a couple of hours per day, to a reliable standard closer to Western European countries. We established free market standards and working with the international financial institutions to invest billions of dollars in energy infrastructure in the region. As a result, large and small businesses alike have benefited by being able to create an environment of innovation. In Southeast Europe, we brought former national adversaries together to collaborate on region-wide energy network planning and development, spraying over $10 billion in energy sector investment just since 2005. We have improved the capacity of utilities and upgraded countless schools, hospitals, and other buildings, enabling citizens to access modern services. We have broken energy monopolies throughout the region, and the US state regulators have helped their counterparts in Europe and Eurasia to, for a few examples, draft and adopt laws and regulations that have opened markets to new suppliers, established wholesale and retail competition, set environmental standards to protect consumers. On a more granular level, we have helped to establish regulatory institutions in 15 countries and helped found the Energy Regulators Regional Association, which brings together over 30 national regulators to accelerate energy reform and further the goal of open, transparent market access across the region. This work has been essential to the economic and democratic process throughout the entire area and throughout the entire region. In less than a generation, 11 countries of the region are no longer foreign assistance beneficiaries. 22 have actually joined the World Trade Organization, and 11 acceded to the EU, and 12 have joined NATO. Energy was at the very core of this progress. It should be acknowledged as one of our greatest foreign policy achievements since the end of the Cold War. But we cannot become complacent in our achievements or overlook the work that still needs to be done. Earlier, I said that in spite of these successes, our engagement was now more important than ever. The Kremlin and Communist China have made it perfectly clear that they are more interested in self-interest and self-determination. In recent years, the Kremlin's intention in the region has become clear: to reestablish an authoritarian sphere of influence in Europe and Eurasia that would strip these nations of their very liberty. Again, the Kremlin and Communist China have made it perfectly clear that they are more interested in self-interest than self-determination. And it's important to recognize that. In a similar but more insidious fashion, the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative has become more known as the China debt trap. Our region is not immune. And we are already seeing the Chinese Communist Party investment in critical infrastructure across the region and especially in Southeastern Europe. This model of subservience runs counter to the democratic values of the United States and the free world. You cannot be accountable to your citizens and serve a foreign master. Energy independence is a vital necessity to preserving democracy in the region. Nations should be able to choose where their power comes from and how much they are willing to pay for it. I want to be clear that this is not about the Kremlin or the Communist Chinese Party. The energy bridge advances USAID's approach to development. We are empowering our partners to make their own choices about energy sources, their economic investments, and the shape of their own democracies. That is true self-reliance. That is exactly what the energy bridge is designed to do. build on the work that we have already done, and continue our commitment to help countries make their own decisions, which in turn help them be more self-reliant. This initiative will connect European and Eurasian energy sector stakeholders with the finance, technologies, and operational experience and expertise necessary to address significant critical infrastructure investments and management needs. The Energy Bridge represents the next generation of our work in the region, building on decades of success and continued partnership with our EU allies, while at the same time responding to today's acute challenges. Thank you for being able to be here this morning, say a few words on this important initiative. I look forward to a dynamic discussion of this exciting opportunity.
Thank you very much, Brock, for a great introduction. And I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Steve Burns, who will go through in a little more detail what this Energy Bridge is all about.
Thank you, Ambassador Morningstar. Thank you, Assistant Administrator Bierman, for the opening remarks. I appreciate everyone logging in today to listen to the or join the discussion on the launch of the new initiative. If we could bring up the one slide, I'd appreciate it. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to explain to you some of the key programmatic elements of the initiative and to answer some questions that will hopefully inform the panel discussion later. Before I move forward, also note the note at the bottom of the slide here. For those of you that would want further information or want some of the monthly updates coming out of our program, please email eecoms@usaid.gov, and we're happy to put you on our mailing list to, again, provide updates as we go forward. So this is an important conversation. Just as we were preparing for it, I think I'll address some questions right on the front end and reiterate some of Assistant Administrator Bierman's comments. So USAID and our programming, we are focused on the countries surrounding the European Union. So we are working a lot in the former Yugoslavia and Albania, plus the former Soviet Union countries around the Black Sea, and then Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus. So those are the key partners in our initiative. But we're very proud that a lot of current EU members, a lot of stakeholders in those countries continue to work with us, continue to work through our legacy programs, and will continue to partner with us in the bridge. So a lot of the work we're doing is focused on bringing countries together and moving them towards the European Union pathway. With regard to several of our joint energy initiatives, the 3Cs initiative, P-TECH, and so on, a lot of those initiatives have started in recent years, whereas USAID has been working in the region since the 90s. And we've been doing work more at the ground level. And we see that the work that we're doing very much supports a lot of these higher level initiatives. We've developed our programming here in close collaboration with the State Department and our interagency colleagues. We are doing a lot of our work to lay the groundwork for many of the infrastructure conversations that are happening at these higher levels. So just quickly, the three primary elements that are part of the program, the competitive integrated energy markets. This is a long-standing program. This is long-standing work that USAID does. It continues to evolve as energy markets continue to evolve. If you look here in the United States, right, it's been a 20, 30 plus year pathway, if not longer, in terms of evolving energy markets. We've got countries on the periphery of Europe that are trying to move up to Western standards. In many cases, we're asking them to do the same job that more developed economies have done in 20, 30 plus years. We're asking them to do it in 10, 15, right? So we're standing there with our countries. We're moving forward. We work very closely with the Energy Community Secretariat in this regard. It's interesting when you see, just looking at Ukraine and some of the work they've done to modernize their energy markets. 50 plus legal and regulatory acts were needed to bring their current energy markets into compliance with the EU initiatives, right? So you take that, then you take the capacity building requirements. It is a very heavy lift, and that's what we at USAID continue to do, to work hand in hand with our partner countries, right? Beyond that, we are trying to move markets just beyond the very technical requirements into power exchanges, okay, and to actually even on the retail side into consumer choice, to try to provide more tools and to spur more private sector investment, right? As opposed to projects done under sovereign guarantee. So that's one major thrust of the program. The infrastructure investment thrust, this is where we also really see more collaboration and where we're really supporting the broader US-EU energy initiatives, okay? It's very convenient, it's very easy to discuss big infrastructure projects, right? But it's more than just feasibility study, financing agreement, and moving on, right? You have to establish how said projects would work within the technical systems, okay? You have to build and make the projects financially credible. We try to bring countries together on joint system planning so that the projects all make sense and aren't competing together with one another. Will Poland at USAID, I think, could discuss this at length. This is a lot of his work that he's done on the power sector and can move over into the natural gas sector. And then the final thrust that we're doing is critical infrastructure protection. And this has slowly evolved. It evolved as more, it started as more of a climate change issue that we had started several years ago in trying to address the more recurrent flooding occurring in Southeast Europe and building the capacity of organizations to withstand natural disasters. Well, the same thing happens in terms of man-made disasters, in terms of cybersecurity, cyber attacks that we're starting to see more of in the region. And so bringing the countries together for information sharing networks, bringing them together to establish the appropriate policies, and then to respond and recover to events. You know, one of my colleagues is very fond of saying when it comes to cybersecurity, that cybersecurity needs to be baked in, not bolted on. So what we're trying to do is bring security aspects into the DNA of organizations, right? So that they're more resilient going forward. This is a little bit of a step outside of a traditional development role, but we think this is very important, right? As the world becomes more digital, that this type of work be considered on the front end, right? And so the US, the EU, we've been leaders in these areas, and this is where we're really trying to establish stronger links between our countries, right, and the assistance countries throughout the region. A credit again to Will Poland at USA for a lot of work he's done. Credit to our regulatory partners at the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. All of the volunteer labor, all of these connections we're bringing. We've got several private sector partners that are doing this as well. So with that, I think what I'll do, I would much more, I think it's more useful to the audience to engage in the panel discussion. I'm available to deep dive into any of these questions here or any questions on the specific elements of the program. But I encourage you all to subscribe to our newsletter. Sorry, I lost the word there. And look forward to engaging in this conversation going forward.
Thank you very much, Steve. That's very helpful. Let me ask two question or clarification, more of a panel question for you, just to make sure that we're all clear. My understanding is that the actual dollars can only go to non-EU countries. That countries in the region that are members of the EU, because they are members of the EU, are not actually eligible for direct AID assistance. But some monies can be used for regional integration that could include those countries. If we maybe just clarify that, if I'm assuming I'm correct. And also that how much emphasis will you be placing on maybe smaller scale projects in the Western Balkans, which would be necessary for the development of their energy sectors?
So with regard to the flow of monies into certain countries versus others, that's a larger scale policy decision, which would be dangerous for me to comment on. What I could say is that USAID's focus is on the non-EU countries. We tend to engage with a lot of EU member states. So we are currently engaging with stakeholders in Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Poland, the Slovak Republic, but they are engaging at their own cost to take part. We do a lot of our work through regional working groups. So for de minimis cost on their parts, they're getting the benefit of broader, US engagement in our broader assistance programs. And again, I would ask Will to speak to that during his comments. And I think Dr. Icord could probably speak to this historically as well. In terms of smaller scale projects, and I guess one other clarification I want to make, we're talking about a broader regional initiative here. This is an initiative that's run out of Washington and run out of the Europe and Eurasia Bureau. As many of the aid folks on the conversation today would know, we are a very decentralized organization. We also have a lot of smaller programs that are run out of our bilateral missions throughout the region. And so we work very closely together. And what I would say is we have a history of supporting both bigger projects and a lot of the smaller projects. We've done a lot of work in recent years on trying to lay the pathway for distributed generation, for instance. And are working very closely with a lot of the utilities in the region on their network development plans to try to identify a lot of these smaller projects, and would be happy to engage with DFC or others in terms of finding financing pathways for these projects going forward.
Okay, that's great. That's that is all very helpful what you're saying. Let me go now to the rest of the panelists, and I'm going to start with Jane Amelot, who is again deputy head of unit at the EU in Brussels. And let me ask you this. It seems to me this can only be successful if there's a lot of cooperation with the EU, and that hopefully that would be a 1 and 1 makes 3. Sitting where you're sitting, how do you view this program? Do you see this as a positive in which there could be cooperation to, really help particularly, in the Western Balkans and other countries surrounding the EU? How do you see this?
Okay, so good morning and good afternoon for those in Europe, everybody. Yeah, thank you for your question. So I'm currently working at the DG Energy at the European Commission, where I'm responsible for networks and regional cooperation. And just to give you a short overview of what we are doing in this region. So the region you're talking about, and well, we work with EU member states and non-EU member states. And in fact, for us, it's really, we work together, because you cannot, like, for instance, the Western Balkans, you cannot just cut it off for energy. It's you have to integrate all this. Just to give you an overview of what we are doing, and then I'll come up to how we could best work together. We have a very efficient policy framework, if I can say, which is called TENI, Trans-European Network Energy, where we focus on key energy infrastructure projects. It's for the whole EU, but it's also projects between EU and non-EU countries. And also we have the second element, which we really use, is with this CESEC, the Central Southeastern Europe Energy Connectivity High-Level Group, where we really have Central Eastern European EU members, but also all the Western Balkans. We have Ukraine, Moldova. So it's really like a big group. And I must say here we've been developing quite a lot of projects. For energy security in this region, we don't see any major issue now. We still need to complete ongoing projects, but when it's completed, we will have a good standard. Where we are working, of course, our second step, I don't know if it was mentioned, but of course, that we have with this new European Commission, the Green Deal. So we really want to decarbonize our energy. We have very big goals. And for instance, if you want, I can focus a little bit on the Western Balkans, where we really want to help them to phase out coal. So for this, in some ways, we would need a focus, maybe gas project, but of course, renewable is also something we are looking for, which is not very easy in this region, and also electricity interconnection, because renewables, you need to balance, so you need to build this up. Of course, we are working also on market integration. We have a project between Bulgaria and North Macedonia on electricity, so we are doing all this. How we can work together, I think we have quite the same objectives. I would say, well, we have this group, this SESEC high-level group, where all stakeholders are welcome. We had a ministerial on the 2nd of October, and we will continue with technical level groups where we focus on certain projects. So I think, any partner in the region is welcome. So it's very open group. And also, probably, I think what could be interesting in this regard is also because we work a lot with DG NEAR, and I guess you saw this economic investment plan for the Western Balkans, where we focus on certain projects. So I think also to work together on this project will be useful. And I must say, well, for money-wise, I mean, we are able to help them, or we have also IFIs like EIB, EBRD, who are helping in the region. What these people also sometimes lack, and where also I think it could be useful to work together with your program, is capacity, technical capacity, because the projects are quite complex. So yes, so I think that will be the areas where we could work together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. And I think you made really critical point that what's important in the region. I think you did mention gas, but also, of course, renewables and integrating electricity networks and the like. And just to make, I know there's been some question in Europe about new gas projects and so forth, and maybe not complete agreement even within the Commission. But can you cooperate, do you think, with AID on projects that do relate to gas?
Well, I mean, our goal is to phase out gas, latest 2050, because we want zero emission, or to decarbonize gas if we manage to do so. So, of course, we don't want to invest in gas project where you will have this lock-in effect, so that because you invest so much money, you will need to use the gas for a very long time. But we see some opportunities in the region, for instance, in the Western Balkans. And you have, if you look at this, you will have this document, Economic Investment Plan for the Western Balkans. You will have some few targeted gas projects where we don't want to invest in big distribution of gas, but maybe targeted project for power plant, because, in some of these countries, they heat with lignite, which, of course, is not really what we want. So I think for targeted project where we see a big added value, we would be able to work on this. But of course, in parallel, we need also to develop renewable projects. So we have some on solar, wind, but also probably hydrogen, which is a new thing that we see coming up. So we need to work on parallel on both things. And of course, I didn't mention, but energy efficiency is, of course, something very important.
Right.
But okay.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, that does sound consistent with what AID is saying, that it will work on whatever areas that countries want to work in with respect to energy sources. Good. Thank you. Let me turn now to Mr. Andanov, Viktor Andanov. I think I have that right, who is the energy advisor to the Prime Minister for North Macedonia. And let me ask you, how do you see all this? How important is this energy bridge to the development of the energy system, not just in North Macedonia, but overall in the Balkans? And one of the things that also seems to be necessary for the Western Balkans is regional integration. And given some of the political issues in the region, how possible do you think regional integration is?
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Hello, everybody. Thanks to the Atlantic Council for invitation. What is the possible role of USAID in the region? Is that we all need to create one integrated market in the electricity market and the natural gas and from other energy aspects. And the first thing is that, as you said, we are not EU member states. So we need to first, in order to do this integration with the markets, we need to implement the EU acquis on the energy side, because we need to have the same situation as EU, clear rules, transparent procedures. laws that are in compliance with the EU in order to have one market, one European market. And this was the main driver of this government in the last 3 years. We have enormous success with the support of the USAID. We've adopted this new law on energy, which is fully in compliance with the EU Acquis Third Energy Package on internal energy. And with the support of USAID, we adopted more than 60, 70 rule books, decrees, decisions that are needed to fully transpose this EU legislation into our domestic legislation, which is some precondition to start to have this market integration. As you mentioned, in the natural gas, unfortunately, in the region, natural gas was not traded as much as the electricity in the last decade. And this is just because of the lack of infrastructure. We don't have gas infrastructure in the region. Let's say Albania, Montenegro, and Kosovo doesn't have connection to the gas pipelines at all. The rest of the countries have limited access to the gas. North Macedonia has only one connection with Russian gas, which is very limited in order if you want to develop gas more in our country and in the region. And we have this concrete project interconnection with Greece. And I think that this project is very important, not just for North Macedonia, it's important for the region, because we are already working on the developing technical documentations for new connections with Kosovo, Albania, and Serbia. So we intend to be some hub for natural gas, and this will increase the consumption of the gas and the trading of the gas in the region. There is also one interesting project in Greece, the LNG terminal in Alexandroupolis, and this I think will make the diversification, the needed diversification in the region. Related to the new investments in gas, as Jane mentioned, the Western Balkan is a coal-intense region. We need now to follow this energy transition. A lot of needs to be done. We need to shut down our coal plants, but we need to find financial assets to invest and to construct new power plants. Since we need to replace coal, we need to invest. Let's say the natural gas plants are the most preferable option, but we need to find investments, and we need to finish the construction with the infrastructure projects. And the most important part, as I mentioned, is the legislation. And this is where I think that the USAID new project can be very helpful in implementation of the new legislation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And for the wide-ranging look that you're taking at all of these areas. I'm glad you mentioned Greece. I think Greece is going to be, sometimes we don't think about the importance of Greece to the Western Balkans region from an energy standpoint, and that Greece wants to become some kind of energy hub, and they do have access to a lot of gas, whether it's from the pipeline system from the Caspian, the LNG terminals that you mentioned, at some point Eastern Mediterranean gas, hopefully. And so that I think Greece can play a very important role, and that interconnection is very important. Your comments, I think, also show the importance that gas still is going to have in the Balkans, and also what you're doing with respect to electricity markets. I don't know if you want to go any further on that, but that's going to be very important. I guess you're tying into Bulgaria, as I understand it.
Yes. As Jane mentioned, we are part of this, under the auspices of the energy community, this project of market coupling with Bulgaria. And this was also, as I enabled by USAID project, because the new legislation made all this precondition to start with this project, which is also important for the energy security of our country and the region. If we didn't have this obligation to transpose this CACM regulation from the EU on the market, we adopted this rule book that implements this regulation. This is a regulation for designing of nominated electricity market operator. We already finished this with the support of USAID, and now the project for market coupling with Bulgaria is continuing. This NEMO market operator will establish the day-ahead market in our country, and it will be responsible body for the next establishing of the power exchange, which will be very challenging task, not just for North Macedonia. It will be challenging task for the region, and we are waiting for the new project from USAID to receive all the support that we need, not just for our country, in the region also, because in terms of electricity, the infrastructure connections are much better in the whole region. We are very well connected with all countries. Now we are in construction phase with the missing part with Albania, which is under the project with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So the region is going into good direction on this in the electricity market development. You know that we have joint capacity auction allocation office in Montenegro, which is for all the region. So we are moving on into this direction. Very good.
Good. Thank you. We have about a little over 20 minutes left, and we have two panelists remaining, plus Steve, if he wants to break in at any point. And then we already have 3 or 4 questions in the Q&A box. So we should move along. And I'm going to go to Bob Eichord, who again is certainly a legend in Eastern Europe and Eurasia, as well as at AID, just to give some historical context. But please limit it, Bob, to 3 or 4 minutes. We are going to have to then move to William Poland, Bill Poland, and then to the audience.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Morningstar. It's a pleasure. We've worked together for many years, and both in the government and at Atlantic Council. And I want to congratulate Steve and Brock on the new initiative, and hope it receives bipartisan support in the months that come. You know, it's actually been 30 years since I first went to Poland in 1990 to start the aid assistance work and the transformation of these energy sectors and integrating them into Western Europe and global markets. And obviously, lots been accomplished, and as Brock was mentioning about the role that aid played, I think, which was vitally important in the accession of the 11 countries to the European Union beginning in 2004. But a lot of challenges remain, especially for the Western Balkans, Ukraine, Moldova, and South Caucasus countries that are the target of this initiative. I'm writing a book on the issue, but today I'm going to make 3 quick comments. I mean, first, I think we've seen obviously a lot of progress over these years in overcoming the legacy of these centralized systems with inefficient monopolistic state energy companies. And aid obviously was heavily involved in the energy restructuring and market development. It's not been an easy process, but as Brock said, I think one of our real accomplishments was the creation in virtually every country in these 3 sub-regions, as well as in the new EU members of energy regulatory agencies and bodies that hopefully in most cases have increased transparency and helped to provide leadership and involvement in the development of the market frameworks. And I think we also very much emphasized the unbundling of the systems, the great greater transparency, and also pursued the strategic privatization to try to improve the economic viability of the systems in at least 10 countries. And clearly the partnership efforts that we had with the USEA and Will Poland and Barry Worthington, who sadly passed away recently, have been very important in that context. Second, I think we've talked about the regional cooperation and network integration, the importance of that in the geopolitical context of the dependence of these countries on Russian gas in particular, and how to reduce that. And I think progress has been made in that process, as I'll mention a little bit later. So just to highlight, I think one of the most significant areas for where the US and EU worked together was in creation of the Energy Community Treaty and the framework, which historically was very important in the context of the post-wars in the region and creating the first multilateral treaty in the region, and the agreements to adopt the EU acquis in energy, environment, and competition, which Victor mentioned in terms of the efforts that the countries are making to implement those acquis, and including now the third package implementation. I think that in gas obviously is a big issue, but I think we did make a lot of investments in Georgia, not only in the south in supporting the South Caucasus pipeline, but also in the reconstruction and development of the gas network in Georgia, especially after the Russian invasion in 2008. And then, of course, Ukraine was a major focus of energy work throughout this period, and is now, of course, much less dependent on Russia with regards to gas, and we've been working on the reforms of naphtha gas and the restructuring of the gas system there. And I think the final point I would make, Dick, is that all the countries now are facing with not only managing the pandemic and recovering from the economic impacts and employment and other issues, but I think they also face this dual challenge, excuse me, of both accelerating the transition to cleaner and more efficient energy systems, as well as enhancing energy security. And I think how they respond to the new aggressive EU climate and green recovery policies will be important as the world looks toward the COP26 next year in the UK. I think gas and energy efficiency are going to be very important to this transition. Each country is somewhat different, obviously, but as Jay said, there's a lot of lignite coal use in many of the countries, and that is problematic with regards to meeting both the environmental problems and the EU requirement and the treaty requirements. And I think the new initiative can be very useful in fostering better investments in sustainable energy infrastructure areas. Obviously, it's worked extensively on electricity planning, and I'm happy to see that Steve and his colleagues have been working more on developing a viable gas, more robust gas network and interconnections and open access systems in that area. And I think it looks like there's good opportunity to work on this with the EU on this major package on the economic investment plan for the Western Balkans. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
That's great, Bob. Thanks very much. There's literally nobody in the world who knows more about the history of AID's activities in that part of the world. I'm going to go to Bill Poland from USEA. I know, Bill, you've worked for years in that region and worked with AID on many programs. You've worked with, and I know Olga from our office has worked with you also for a long time. So maybe your comments on the program, plus one of the questions that has come up from the audience today is the whole cybersecurity issue, which protection of infrastructure is a significant part of the energy bridge. Maybe you could make a few comments on that, and then I'll see if Steve has anything he wants to add, and then go to other questions from the audience.
Thank you, Ambassador Morningstar, for the question, and thank you to the Atlantic Council for inviting me to participate in this terrific panel. I have worked both with Dr. Eichhorn and Dr. Burns beginning in the 1990s, the early 1990s. And it's been one of the most terrific honors of my life to do this work in the region. We look at the progress that the region has made, and Bob talked about it quite a bit. It's been tremendous. When we think about the objectives that USAID laid out in the 1990s to establish a market-oriented electricity and gas sector as a way to improve regional security, we have to think about a couple of different sub-objectives there. One, to ensure that the infrastructure was sufficiently robust to connect countries that wanted to trade with each other and to connect the region with Europe. And two, to ensure that their regulatory and policy frameworks enable them to cooperate and trade together. And it's been this 29 to 30 year effort that USAID has had in the region to build the capacity from the bottom up that's enabled that to happen. Working with transmission system operators, electric power transmission system operators, the regulatory agencies to improve their human and their institutional capacities to work together on cooperative planning issues, on network planning, on regulatory reform that's needed for markets. And it's indeed one of the benefits that USAID brings as a unique attribute as one of the leading development assistance agencies in the world. This sustained effort that in cooperation with the partners in the region and in Europe has led to the to investments in interconnections across the region. Georgia being able to trade with Turkey through a new interconnection and planned interconnections. Another major interconnection between Armenia and Georgia to tie those countries together in the South Caucasus. An interconnection that's being examined between Georgia and Romania via the Black Sea undersea cable to tie the Caucasus to Europe. And the work that USAID is focusing on now in cooperation with its European partners to tie Ukraine and Moldova and help them synchronously connect to Europe. This is one of the largest post-World War II infrastructure projects that's been undertaken. And I think the Energy Bridge for its future work is going to be looking at more specific infrastructure projects that support the integration of Europe with the region, strengthening the Euro-Atlantic Alliance, improving electricity and gas trade. And one of the areas you mentioned, Dr. Morningstar, is cybersecurity. And this is a really important element of the work. Many of the utilities in the region are just awakening to this challenge. They're not aware of the threat landscape that faces them. And frankly, many of them feel that they're not specific targets. They're rather small and they're not targeted. They're not among the higher profile targets. Yet we saw in Ukraine the damage that can be done. And the fact that the region is integrated, both electrically and will be integrated increasingly in gas, leads to the prospect that a strategic attack targeted appropriately, perhaps on several critical infrastructure items, could take down large parts of the grid, could take down the gas infrastructure during a really cold day. It could cause a lot of damage. And I think USAID will continue its efforts to support cybersecurity improvements in these utilities. The first challenge is to enable the C-suite or to inform the C-suite of the challenge so that it can direct the resources to the folks in the utilities that need to undertake the reforms to enhance the cybersecurity.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. And I'm going to go to some further questions from the audience. And one question that I will actually direct to Steve. And Steve, if you have any other comments on what's been said already, you could make them. There's been a question about the 3 Cs initiative. And you mentioned it I think it was you, maybe Brock mentioned it in your talk earlier. And the question is, how can this Energy Bridge help the 3 Cs initiative? And I'll ask given the context that the countries outside of the EU in the region are not part of the 3 Cs initiative right now. And although you're doing regional work and some of the 3 Cs countries can be involved in that at their own expense, as you put it, How do you see a relationship between this program and the 3Cs initiative?
Well, thanks for that question. And it's a good question. What I would say, and I would point right back to Will's comments that he just made, right? And actually, I think Ms. Amelot had made a very similar comment about the infrastructure is interconnected, right? So a weakness in one part of the regional infrastructure then translates across the entire continent. And so where we engage perhaps with the 3Cs is the interconnectivity of the networks. So while we per se aren't necessarily promoting a specific infrastructure project in Poland, right, or a specific infrastructure project per se in Romania, we are looking at the interplay of the regional network writ large. And so while we aren't providing direct assistance to EU central countries, we are accounting for their infrastructure and working together with the countries writ large to better prioritize said upgrades. I would say part of our philosophy, though, is we would like to move more towards private financed infrastructure, more of a project finance mechanism. The $1 billion investment fund is a great start, but when it comes to large scale infrastructure, $1 billion is not a lot. Okay, so to get the region where we want it to go, it's going to need to get to several billions of dollars worth of infrastructure investment. So that would be my direct response to that. As one other point I'd like to make is just it's a little bit of a non sequitur, but I have the microphone. I just wanted to again thank Dr. Eichord for being on the call today. As you say, he truly is a legend. When Brock was recounting all of the things that have been done, I think he was ticking off his CV. Check. That's a lot of credit to Bob for all of that. So I'm thrilled he could join us today.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Yeah, Bob, you're a hero. With respect to your comments on the $1 billion, that I guess the Development Finance Corporation has to invest, the new U.S. Development Finance Corporation has to invest in the region. Remember, that can be leveraged as well. Like OPIC monies have traditionally been leveraged. That $1 billion can end up guaranteeing much more than that $1 billion.
Understood.
So
Understood.
that can be very helpful, and I think it is important to recognize that there are regional issues that you can work on that relate to projects in 3Cs countries, but will have an effect on non-3Cs countries, at least at this point, non-3Cs countries. Okay, a couple of questions that I'm trying to amalgamate some questions. John Roberts asked about a Balkan gas ring, and that also relates to some questions on gas coming into Albania, for example, from the TAP pipeline and maybe to Croatia and so forth. I'd like to hear any comments that any of you might have on the feasibility of a Balkan gas ring. And then the other question, sort of a related question, and maybe Jane can respond to this one. How much of a threat to the work that we're talking about and to the regional integration would Turkstream 2 have if it becomes fully operational within the region? So I'm trying to think who might be the best person to first respond. Let me go to Jane Amelot, and any comments on Turkstream and on the so-called Balkan gas ring, and then others can jump in. And by the way, Will Poland, I'm sorry I called you Bill. I guess you're Will. Anyway.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Turkstream 2, of course, this is a clear political project, but I think we know with all the gas infrastructure we've been building in the region, it's not a threat anymore because all of the countries affected by Turkstream 2 have some diversification options. So, for instance, we invested a lot in this IGB interconnection Greece-Bulgaria. So Bulgaria can get some gas from TAP, from Azerbaijan, from LNG in Greece. We invested 50 million euro in this project from EU money. We are also working on the Krk LNG project, which will also provide direct access to LNG for countries like Hungary in the region, not only Croatia, where we invested 100 million euro EU money, so it's quite a lot. And the last country crossed by Turk Stream 2 is Serbia, where we also now just decided to invest 30 million euro on the project called IBS, Interconnector Bulgaria-Serbia, giving also access to Serbia to Azerbaijan gas and LNG from Greece. So I think we manage, yeah. And I guess you know that TAP has just been finished a few weeks ago, which was a great success also for us. Yeah, and maybe I'll have, as I have the floor, maybe I saw one question I'll quick answer, because it was a question on Albania and the connection from TAP to Albania. I think we support this one project which is called FIA Flora, which is to give gas to Albania for certain power and heat and power production. But there was a question about the big project, which is called EAP, which is a project going up to Croatia, which we think would be maybe a too big project. Yeah, thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to jump in on any of these points that were just mentioned?
If I
Okay,
could,
I'm gonna-
if I
go
could,
ahead.
I'd like to.
Will.
Thank you. I think that it's a very well informed question, and a couple of thoughts here. One, the Turk Stream, the gas that will flow through Turk Stream if it's commissioned and put into operation, leaves a void in the Trans-Balkan pipeline. And whilst the contracts are still in place and prevent some of the gas from new sources of gas flowing up from the south to the north, eventually that should provide another avenue for supply diversification in the region. The question becomes, in the case of Moldova, for example, how can Moldova access that gas when the pipes are owned by Moldova Gas, a Russian subsidiary, a Gazprom subsidiary, and Moldova hasn't implemented the third energy package to make available third-party access to its pipes. And so I think you see some of these questions throughout the region. It's not just a question of infrastructure development. It's not just a question of interconnecting pipes. It's a question of enabling legislation and regulation to enable third-party access to pipes that provide the sources and supply for diversification.
Okay, thank you. We have about 2 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes left. So I'm going to ask maybe 2 questions together. One question that I think possibly Steve and Jane can best answer: how mechanically, logistically, will coordination take place between the US and EU? Could it be done through the US-EU Energy Council, or EU-US Energy Council, as it's called in Europe? How will that coordination take place? And then the other question I'd briefly ask Victor and maybe Will or others, that are how important are small-scale projects, and is it possible to absorb, for these projects to absorb the complications of renewable energy and successfully make that part of an important part of the grid? So very briefly, Steve and Jane on the cooperation, and then anybody who wants to comment on the importance of smaller projects and renewable energy and whether that can be accomplished. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to the rest of the questions. Many, many good questions.
I can start quickly just on the cooperation. I think there's cooperation at many levels. It's a very complex sector. And so you have the US-EU Energy Council, you have PTEC, USAID. We do a lot of our cooperation through the Energy Community Secretariat, which reports up to the Commission. So there are multiple levels of cooperation. Before we enact specific donor programs, we engage all the other donors in the respective countries to make sure that we are well coordinated and aren't stepping on one another's toes. But there's the bigger picture through the Energy Council, and then that flows down through all of the organizations, and we do our best. Sometimes it becomes a complicated dance, but there's a lot of conversation going on between respective organizations.
Good. Any comment on that, Jane?
Yes, so I agree with that. I mean, maybe I will add 2 points. I think I mentioned already this CESEC high-level group, where we also, well, we have high-level meetings, but we also have technical groups, and I think US parties, investors, whatever, can always participate. And the Western Balkans are fully part of it. So really, I mean, they work like member state. They are at the same level. And the second point I want to make, as you mentioned, we have difficulties around renewable projects in the region because, of course, the investment conditions and the framework is not so good. So I think it's also good to talk with investors also from the US or companies. I think it's also a good way for us to progress. Thank you.
Okay. Then maybe our time basically is up. Just any brief comments on what Jane said about renewable projects and how that can best be accomplished in the region. Either Victor, Will, or anybody else.
Yes,
Very
thank you.
briefly.
Very shortly, we introduced, thanks to this support from USAID, we introduced new support scheme, new incentives for construction of renewable energy sources. We introduced feed-in premiums. We have very transparent procedures. We put even smaller than you think scale projects, because the small scale, depending on the region in our country, small scale is very small compared to US or Europe. So we are moving now to this direction with private partner, public-private partnership, private investment. We need to have in mind that we need to find additional support as in EU to be transposed in the Western Balkan countries in order to attract more investors in the private terms, because everybody is coming and asking for power purchase agreements. So we are Europe, we don't give power purchase agreements, but we need to implement some new incentives in order to accelerate these investments.
Yeah, that's going to be a key issue, power purchase agreements on smaller projects. I think we have to leave it at that. This has been I think, a wonderful panel. I think, given all the good questions that we can't answer, we could go on for at least another hour, but we just don't have the time to do that. So I want to thank the entire panel, Brock, Steve from AID, as well as the panelists, for just a terrific discussion. And we had also a terrific audience with really good questions. We had 380 responses to this event. So a lot of people were listening, and I think it's been tremendously helpful. So on behalf of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council, I want to thank you all. Everybody stay healthy and join us in all the many other events that we will be having. So thank you very much, and have a good day.